eminence and reverend fathers, I want to thank you for this opportunity to speak to you. So we live in a time of monsters. I announced this to you, but I think all of you already know that. We only need to glance at popular culture to realize this. At the narrative level of our culture and our stories, we've become obsessed with monsters, with the strange, alien, with the marginal, with the glorification of the exception, of things that don't fit. Most of us here probably grew up with Sesame Street, where we were told that monsters are our friends. And it's no longer in fiction by now. The monsters have left the dark spaces under our beds. They have left our nightmares to come out into the open. At a social level, we can feel and see all around us the growing polarization, the acceleration of what we can only call the breakdown, the decomposition of culture, a progressive dissipation of the center which rallies us as a society. And in thinking about this, it's difficult not to reminisce. It's difficult not to meditate on the famous poem by Yeats, The Second Coming. We tend to go back to that poem because it seems, at least in our more frightening moments, we get the feeling that the horrific cycle of the 20th century is on our horizon again. Turning and turning in the widening gyre, the falcon cannot hear the falconer. Things fall apart, the center cannot hold. Mere anarchy is loosed upon the world. The blood-dimmed tide is loosed, and everywhere the ceremony of innocence is drowned. The ceremony of innocence is drowned. The best lack all conviction, while the worst are full of passionate intensity. The monsters have left the dark spaces under our beds. They have left our nightmares to come out into the open. At a social level, we can feel and see all around us the growing polarization, the acceleration of what we can only call the breakdown, the decomposition of culture, a progressive dissipation of the center which rallies us as a society. This poem, of which I've quoted the first part, is probably one of the most known in modern poetry, the most cited. I think it's actually the most anthologized poem there is. And it rings so true because we stand here in that widening gyre at the edge of the world where the wheel is spinning so fast, it feels as if it's going to come off its axis.
Yeah, that was the opener for the album that I'm making from Jonathan's talk, Pentecost for the Zombie Apocalypse. And the album is going to be called Pentecost for the Zombie Apocalypse, the musical, which was an idea that Jacob gave me, Jacob the Fool, your moderator. Yeah, I really like that.
I think it's great. You know, that talk, this is Pentecost for the Zombie Apocalypse, it was one of the first, how can I say this? It wasn't one of the first public talks I gave, but I was invited by an actual diocese of the Orthodox Church to speak to them. So, oh man, I was nervous. I was like more nervous than anything I had done before, because here I was with the Archbishop of the South and like a room full of hundreds of priests and their families. But when they asked me to do it, I barely believed it. I was like, I couldn't believe they were asking me to do this. So they said, you know, we'd like you to come and talk. What would you want your talk to be about? And so off the top of my head, I thought, what's the craziest thing I could say? Like, what's the craziest title I could give them? So I give them this title and right away they answer, yes, that's good. Go for it. And so Man,
Very surprising.
I put like so much pressure on myself. And so here I was like, and so I spent so much time preparing that. I wrote it out and then I recorded it and then I would listen to it while I was carving to try to kind of memorize the different parts. And so that's why it sounds more written than most of the things I'm doing. And it sounds kind of has a rhythmic quality because I spent a lot of time writing it out.
Yeah, I noticed that right away. Like Lisa, who manages your clip channel, she mentioned the talk to me and said that it was something very special. And when I listened to it, like that's something that stood out, that it was very, very thoughtful, let's say, and very structured. So it was also very easy to put it to music, actually, because the structure was so obvious.
Exactly. I mean, I really did write it out more like I would have written. It was almost like a poem or like a spoken word things. And so
Yes.
I put in a lot of visual imagery and a lot of analogies that I wouldn't be able to think of at the top of my head. And so that's why it kind of sounds that way. And it was really fascinating to watch the crowd because first of all, I didn't know we were going to do it during dinner, which just freaked me out because I'm going to talk about zombies. And so here we are, like, sitting at dinner. Luckily, I didn't have too many extreme images in my actual presentation when I did it. But it was a lot of fun because I could see a lot of people hadn't heard about me back then. Like a lot of people didn't know who I was. A lot of people were wondering, like, who's this guy? Like, why is he the one talking to us? But I was watching out of the audience at some point. I could see that I had like people were hypnotized because they were hearing stuff they'd never heard of before, I guess, maybe something like that, or they had never heard someone say it that way. So it was a lot of fun. It was really very overwhelming, I would say.
Yeah, understandable.
When you think when you think back to like preparing for that and how overwhelming that was to be talking to them, how does it feel now that your YouTube celebrity's grown so significantly? And for example, that very talk that night, now there's a musician in Germany making it into an entire album. And the way, it's not just that you're putting your stuff out there, like you're popular on other YouTube channels. People are bringing you up and mixing you into their own ideas. What does it feel like to have gone from where you were preparing for that speech to where you are now? And was this intentional, or did you just fall into doing all this kind of thing?
I mean, it's all Jordan Peterson's fault, really.
Yeah.
It really is, in the sense that when I was writing about symbolism, I've been writing about symbolism for a long time, but in a very tight place. I was writing about on the Orthodox art. It was really Jordan when I encountered him and I kind of reached out to him, and then he decided, I don't know why, like he just decided he was going to take me on this trip with him. And right when he was writing during the early controversy around Jordan, he said, I want to have you on my YouTube channel. This was like while everything was blowing up and, he was having all these freedom of speech rallies and stuff. And I was like, why does he still want to have me on his channel as this is happening? And so I just kind of crossed myself and said, okay, God, like, I'm just going to move in this direction because this is what's happening and we'll see where it goes. But it still feels weird all the time because in a way I'm very isolated. I live in Quebec. There are no Orthodox people barely around here. Like my parish is like 12 people. And so I'm very isolated. And also because, it's all kind of happening online. And so sometimes I'll have someone like a priest or someone ask me, or I'll talk to a priest and I'll feel like he's a little impressed by me. And I'm like, what is that odd? Like, you're a priest. I'm just some guy on YouTube. I'm a YouTuber. My kids embarrass me constantly by telling their friends that their father is a YouTuber. And I'm like, don't say that. Shut up. Don't tell people that.
It's, by the way, also the follow-up song to the one that we just listened to.
So I have a question for you. Are you going to are you going to do it as if kind of take the whole talk and put it in music, like just section it out, or what's your plan for this?
Oh, what I did was I listened to the talk once and then again, but with my I put it in the cutting program, and then I tried to feel for when you started a thread and ended it, And it was very easy to segment it that way. To a lot of the stuff that you're showing. And
it's hard to put into music. Yeah.
Yes, right. But yeah, it's pretty much all of it.
Sweet. Well, that first song was really nice. I really like the heavy beats. It just makes so much sense in terms of the subject and this kind of swing, especially now with Halloween and everything. It makes a lot of sense. So I've been really enjoying it.
Yeah, thank you very much. I'm glad to hear that. Definitely.
Wandering aimlessly in a world that's losing its center. Unlike most of his monstrous brothers, let's say, the zombie is truly the harbinger of contemporary nihilism. The zombie has no magic. The arrival of the zombie usually has no clear reason, but rather the zombie is couched in a biological accident, a disease, a plague. It's simply an animated corpse. The zombie inhabits the indeterminate space of living death, roaming around in packs. The zombie shows us the mindless wandering of the mindless mob. The mindless wandering of the mindless mob with an insatiable hunger for devouring others, for swallowing life. The zombie shows us mindless wandering of the mindless mob with an insatiable hunger for devouring others, for swallowing life. If the vampire is the monster of aristocracy, the zombie is the monster of the mass, the demos, the monster of the accidental, of nihilism in idiosyncrasy taken all the way to decomposition. In every major city in North America, they have these events, corpses, shifting around with dead, empty eyes, pretending to be the walking. You could say that they're liturgical zombies, if there's such a thing. If there's such a thing. If there's such a thing. Liturgical zombies, if there's such a thing. The zombie shows us mindless wandering of the mindless mob with an insatiable hunger for devouring others, for swallowing life. The zombie both typifies the mob while simultaneously the absolute individualism, the absolute isolation of contemporary life. The zombies in a horde only interact with what they desire, and they never interact with each other. And the trope of cannibalism is very ancient. It's there in all the ancient stories, all the ancient myths. But the tweak in zombies on that theme of desiring to eat the brain, it's a very powerful one, because it's truly the image of the nihilist. Because the zombie is a creature without meaning, without intelligence. It misses any form of personhood. It misses any form of personhood. And it has this insatiable desire which mirrors what it lacks. It desires what it lacks: identity, meaning. And this desire appears in that materialist reduction of identity and personhood to that clump of cells that we have up in our cranium. The zombie wants to eat your brains because it cannot eat the mind, and it cannot inhabit the mind. But strangely enough, this desire to eat the living is the extreme perversion of our desire for communion. And it's also a distilled image of all our passions. Our attempt to fill the unquenchable yearning through our passion always transforms other people into commodities that we think will bring us what we need. So the zombie is both an image of the social breakdown, the person as a meaningless statistic, the disappearance of common values except the overwhelming desire to consume. But so it is also the breakdown of the person itself, to a soulless, desiring death machine. There's a strict analogy between these different levels of the world. The social breakdown and polarization is to the state what the abandonment to the passions is for the person. And the zombie is both of those fragmentations at the same time.
Yeah, that was the second one. That one, like the bit, really resonated with me too, because you mentioned that we make other people into commodities that bring us what we, or that we think will bring us what we need, and that's also something that I noticed about myself, like in the past, I don't know, 2 years since I discovered Jordan and all of that stuff. So yeah, it's on point, man.
Well, I really like this one. I really liked it also because it seems like the theme is very clear, because it's basically me trying to explain the zombies, and then there was like when that guitar drops at some point, like this kind of heavier guitar. I was really digging that. I was really enjoying that, and it's yeah, and it also works with kind of what I'm saying. It just really feels like it's yeah, it was good. I really like this one. I think this is one of the best ones.
Thank you, man. Yeah, I really appreciate that.
And 2mørVs, do you want to share why it is, like what was it about Jonathan's work that made you want to mix like an album out of his material? What drew you to Jonathan speaking?
So the first time I heard of Jonathan was through Akira the Don's song, obviously Santa Claus Exists, which I really love that song. It's amazing. And the whole idea of how, you know, if we can talk about something, if the idea of it exists, that is existence. Like it's not that only things that you can grab exist. Like there's, like, for example, love is, as you say, is something that we can't really grab, but it still exists. And then Jonathan, you have, I think that's because you're French Canadian, you have a special flow, I would like to say. So you speed up in times more than I think like Germans or just English people would speed up. And also you have more of a melody in your speech. That's also something that I've only recognized in Jordan, really, too. So that was, let's say, the technical aspect that made me wanna make an album with that. And when I was looking for bits that I could make just songs out of, because like an album, when I started, an album was just too big for me. When I was looking for bits to sample, I came across the one where you talk about extremism and Sam Harris' view on history and Christianity in a way. And that was right after I watched the debates with Sam and Jordan.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that resonated with me too. I could see what you were talking about there.
Well, I've been having way too much fun with all of this. I'm really enjoying it, and my kids, they don't understand. It's so funny because I'm just dad to them, and also because I talk about symbolism and I talk about Christian symbolism. So for them, it's like this kind of snooty, not snooty, but like a stuffy kind of subject that's not very interesting. And so then I'll play for them a song that you did, and they don't understand, like, wait, that's my dad, and what is this song, and what's going on, and why is there this beat behind it? And it's just funny to see the contrast. And for me, it makes sense. And also because I see that the subjects that you choose, they make sense in terms of the music that's going with them. You tend to choose like kind of harder subjects, things that are talking about let's say like this, like talking about monsters, talking about zombies, and all of this extremism, these different subjects that go well with the music. And so I can see that it makes sense. There's something about your intuition in terms of the subject that makes sense with the type of music that you're putting to them.
Yeah, let's say intuition wise, I've noticed that it made like the songs that I picked, or the bits that I picked, made songs for my personal development. But I only recognized that after I really got into it, and because of I'm not a traditional Christian or anything. I did not have a good relationship to Christianity or belief or the church or any of that, partly because we're Protestants here in northern Germany, and we don't take, or most people don't take their belief really seriously, and so I couldn't either when I got into it as a teenager, and this was far easier for me to get into, and I really noticed that when I started getting into the album, how profound the symbolism was that you were talking about. Like, there were really intense emotional situations while I was working on them, where I felt like that's a bit too much, but like a small revelation to you know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, this talk I'm really happy in a way that you chose this talk, because it's not, let's say this talk is not my most viewed video, but it's for sure one of the most layered things that I put together. And so I appreciate that you perceive that you kind of diving into that, because there are a lot of things that I'm saying, they're always kind of working on different levels at the same time. At least I'm trying to do that while I'm talking. So I appreciate it. It was, at first I was surprised that you kind of chose this, but then I was like, well, especially if Lisa told you she's been attentive to my work, so she also knows like what the hidden, which videos are better. Talking about Kanye West will get you more views, but it doesn't mean that those videos are the best. Like that the talks I'm giving on that subject are the best talks, let's say.
But I'm quite happy that you talked about Kanye, because I wasn't completely sure what to think of it. Like, I was happy that he went in that direction, but I also didn't know what like real Christians would think of that, because I come to a degree, I come from the outside, I would say.
But I think I don't know what to think about it totally yet either, because he is really the fool, like in so many ways. It's like you have to be careful, because as soon as you kind of support what he's saying, then he's going to turn around and post pictures on Twitter of him in a like giant blue superhero suit, like which is what he's been doing. And then you're like, okay, what's happening? Like this whole thing, what is going on? Like what's going on? So we have to we have to kind of watch. That's why I say watch the fools. I don't say follow the fools. It's like you watch and see what's going on and take the best of what's happening, but be careful, because they can turn around and lose it on you anytime.
Yeah, understandable.
Oh man. All right. So what's next? What's the next song? What is the next song about?
The next one is called The Ultimate Unexpected, The Return of the Monster. That's a quite short one, but yeah, let's just listen and then talk about it. I'm quite proud of the choir at the end, by the way.
All right.
The monster, as an inhabitant of the margin, is a token of that which does not fit within what we know, cannot be measured in the categories that we are aware of. It appears as a freak, as the ultimate unexpected. The monster is both the encounter with the surprise of the future as we move forward in time. So to encounter the unexpected, the monster is also the encounter with the surprise of the edge, as the church expands to the dark corners of the world, but also the dark corners of our own lives. As the Spirit of God transforms us, for most of us, there will always be foreign elements, monsters hiding in our garments of skin. And so here in Pentecost, this monster is represented as not yet in the church. In the church. But as part of the potential into which the church can grow. As part of that which can hear the gospel in its language. As part of the potential into which the church can grow. As part of that which can hear the gospel in its language.
I have a question about that one, by the way, because you say it's part of the potential into which the church can grow. Is that something positive or something negative? Like, do you mean it's the monster can be included in the church and come into the center, or is it that the monsters close in on the church and then, you know?
No, I think that in that case, what I'm talking about is mostly the idea that the monster manifests that which will in the future, let's say, be inside. And so it's like you encounter this monster, and at first it is this wild thing, and then slowly it is tamed and can enter into, you can kind of enter into a relation with it without it destroying you. And so that's kind of what I mean, is that's what I mean. The potential, like the future potential of the church will always appear as monstrous. So yeah, but that one was amazing. I'm really surprised at how much it's as if, I don't think I'd heard that there was so much rhythm in the way that I was speaking, but then the beat is so perfect with what I was saying that I was like, wow, I almost, did you change the timing in my speaking? I think you did.
I did partly, but not really. Like what I do mostly, especially with the songs that I had here, is that I adjust minimally. So because you didn't have music, so you're not perfectly on time, but the overall flow and rhythm is the same, I would say. Like except like small things maybe, but yeah, generally that's how you spoke this.
Yeah, but that was really, I really like that. I also like how you kind of layered the voices and everything. I thought that was great. Yeah, that was really wonderful. It's like every song I hear, I'm going to think it's the best one now. I don't know what to do.
Thank you, man. Thank you. Really appreciate that. Yeah, you can't put it into words. That's very cool. Yeah, it was also fun to record the layered vocals in that, because like there's the more silent part where it was like partly whispering and all that, and then yeah, that was a lot of fun. Definitely.
Yeah, and also, at first I was surprised when I saw when it started where you were going. I was like, where's he going with this? Because it was almost like very, I don't know, like a flute or something, or kind of very joyful and kind of very, and it was very different from the darker beats that you had in the zombie one. And so I was like, okay, so where is he going with this? But then it totally came together when I started to hear like what I was saying. I forget what I was going to say. I didn't know what I was going to say myself. And so as I was listening to it, I'm like, yeah, this makes total sense.
Yeah, you're talking about when you start saying the sentence, the monster is the encounter with the surprise of the future, something like that. That's where I mixed into the more traditional instruments, like an upright bass and strings and flute. I mixed the synthesizer into that to symbolize the future.
Yeah, nice.
In a way. So yeah, that you recognize that. Awesome. Yeah, we can get into the fourth one now, if you're all up for that. Sure, yeah. It's called Cynocephalus Waiting for Crumbs.
The notion of the Cynocephalus has an important history in Christianity. It comes, of course, from the Hellenic past, from the legends of Alexander the Great. But the image of the dog-headed man became the central image of the Christian edge of the world, the ultimate hostile foreigner. And personally, I think that it partly became so important because of its strong analogies in the Bible. Christ speaks of the Canaanite woman, and he tells her that one should not give to dogs the bread that is meant for the children. And the answer of the Canaanite woman is analogous to what we see in this icon. That even the dogs eat the crumbs that fall from their master's table. So here in the icon of Pentecost, we see this dog not so much at the end of the table, but maybe on the edge of the church, maybe on the edge of the world. Maybe on the edge of the church, maybe on the edge of the world. Maybe on the edge of the church, maybe on the edge of the world. This one is not a Canaanite, but a canine-ite. That might seem like a really bad pun, but I assure you that it will cause modern interpreters to cry foul in reading these ancient accounts, and will say that all of this question is just a matter of bad transcription. I don't think so. I don't think so. All these foreigners in the icon of Pentecost, culminating to the impossible monster, are the surprise cover on the edge of the church, anticipating, maybe waiting for the crumbs, maybe waiting for the antidoron, which we can imagine flowing out of the church, so that even those we can barely recognize as our brothers can have a foretaste of the kingdom of heaven, the kingdom of heaven.
That was great. I love that one.
I really like the way that when I said at the edge of the world or at the end of the church, and then it just kind of gets really heavy at that moment. I thought that was great. It was made total sense.
Thank you. Yeah, that one was also fun to record. Like the bass line was my favorite to play while recording the album, and also like the bit where you say "I don't think so," and then the music stops for like a second or something. Like I enjoyed that one too. Like when I was playing it, like, oh, I felt that.
Yeah, these little moments when I always try to mock modern scholarship. The problem is with those moments is I always regret them, because sometimes I go on these rants where I just kind of rip into modern scholarship and to like kind of modern Bible scholars, and then I'm like, oh man, why did you have to do that? But nonetheless, I think we all enjoyed it a little bit because we feel like they just misunderstand so much in their capacity to be technically accurate. Especially with this, like the whole Cynocephalus thing, like the whole St. Christopher thing is hilarious, because I've read so many books where they mock the idea that St. Christopher was a dog-headed man, because they say that they see a mistaken transcription between the idea that he was from Canaan, so like in Latin, Canaan, Canaan, and that he was a canine, so Canin, right? So Canaan, and they're like, oh, those stupid people who just mistranscribed. But it's like, don't you see that in the story that Christ tells, the Canaanite woman is called a dog? Like, you think it's just a mistaken transcription? The fact that Christ himself calls the Canaanite woman a dog seems to be more than a mistaken transcription, or at least it's a very fortuitous mistaken transcription, because it totally makes sense with the idea of this encounter that Christ has with the foreign woman, and then calls her a dog, and how this then gets turned into St. Christopher and a bigger story about about the same situation, about the same problem of how do you encounter that which is too strange, that doesn't fit with yourself? How do you tame it? How do you encounter it? How do you deal with it? And so I just always find it funny that scholars are unable to see. Like, I've never read a scholarly account where they mention that there seems to be at least a plausible analogy in the story of Christ and this Canaanite woman. I've never seen it, and like, it seems like you should be the smart one and be able to see that there. But yeah. Anyways,
where does that wish to not see it come from, though? What do you think?
I think it has to do with an Enlightenment idea that people were stupid back in the day. And there's a mix between thinking that people were stupid and also thinking that, and also not understanding the idea of relevance realization, or understanding that even if there's a mistake in transcription, all right, so imagine there are manuscripts and you transcribe them and then you make mistakes. There are plenty of mistakes in transcriptions, like it happens all the time. But what often happens is, because those mistakes don't make sense, then if when the next person reads the transcribed version, they'll correct the mistakes because they'll see that the transcription mistake doesn't make sense, and so they fix it, right? It's irrelevant. It's not a relevant thing. Whereas if a mistake in transcription gets remembered and gets passed down, through generations, then it means that it has relevance. It means that when people read it, they read it in a way that made sense in the story. And so to ignore that and to say that it's just a mistake is stupid, because if people keep it and remember it and transmit it, it means that it connects to something that is deeper than just a mistake. And so I think that that's the same with so many things. You hear modern scholars always say things like the story of Alexander the Great is a perfect example, where they go through the stories of Alexander the Great and then they try to parse out the legend from what they think is historical. And they do that with Christ too, right? The Jesus seminar and all that nonsense. But what they forget is that those other parts that you think are not historical, why do people remember them? Like, do you account for that? Why do people transmit them? Why do people continue to tell those stories? There's a reason. So at least if you're going to discount them and say they're not historical, you should still tell me why they're important, because they were remembered and they didn't get left out of the canon. They didn't get kind of weeded out when people heard it. People didn't hear them and go, "What? No, that's stupid. Take that. What are you talking about?" Like if someone had said, Jesus started a shoe shop in Bethlehem and started to sell shoes, people would be like, "What? No, that's not part of the tradition." But if there are some little aspects which got kind of, I don't know, like we woven in somehow and then they get transmitted and get remembered, it means that they connect nonetheless to the story that is being told. It's a way of telling stories that people just don't, that somehow can't or I'm hoping now people can start to think of things that way again, because it's way more important to understand why people started telling legends about Alexander the Great or about St. Christopher than it is to get to the historical core of what supposedly really happened, or what you can prove really happened, because that's pretty much that in the end that becomes almost irrelevant.
Yeah, I see what you mean. Yeah, it's crazy. It ties into the I would say the modern notion that we discard meaning in general and the metaphysical, let's say, in general, and just try to reduce everything to mere atoms, let's say.
But that's the thing. Like, I think that's kind of our job right now, is to also help people see that you can't do that. Even if you try to, it's not going to happen. If you try to reduce things to the most meaningless kind of random event, what ends up happening is that if you even just if you remember it, it means it makes sense. If you remember it, it means that it's part of a meaning story. And so you can't get rid of it. So if you can't get rid of it, what exactly are you trying to do by deconstructing everything down to the lowest level. Like, what is your point? Because you're still going to end up with something that is a story, and something that you'll still string along within a pattern of meaning, and that will communicate something, and that will make sense in terms of story. Because, you know, if you could prove, let's say that if you could prove that some religious character had, you know, that his, I don't know, that his shoelaces were red, like if you could prove that it happened, people would still not remember it. Like, people would just forget it because it doesn't matter. It's not a part of the story, you know. So you still have to string it up in a narrative.
Yeah, maybe it's like when I think of myself, like the atheist me, like 14-year-old, and not wanting to go to church and all that. Like I always felt smart when I was like, yeah, that's stupid. God doesn't exist. But it also didn't feel, that's also that was interesting to me. It never felt like I was talking to people when I said God doesn't exist. It felt like I was talking to God. I say, oh, you don't exist. You know, it's crazy.
That's hilarious. Yeah, it ended up like you couldn't avoid it being a kind of act of rebellion, even though you were saying that God doesn't exist. It still happened in a way that would be a kind of rebellion towards God. Yeah, that's hilarious.
Yeah, I think we don't get around that. Also, like maybe that's but I think because God exists, and so you can't be in a situation where you're not rebelling against him when you say something like that. I think, I mean, maybe intellectually, but I'm not so sure about that.
Well, I don't think so. I think that at least even the most kind of rationalist atheist, if you talk to him for a while, all of a sudden the curtain slips, and you can see the like angry, you know, the angry person behind. You can see the kind of resentful, angry person that is annoyed that they were betrayed by some pastor or whatever their story is. All of a sudden it kind of flashes at you, and you can see that they're angry. It's more, they're more angry at God than really they believe that God doesn't exist.
Yeah, that's my impression too, definitely.
Definitely. So I have a question for you. So where are you, like, where are you now, like in your own journey? Like, what's your, where do you see yourself? Like, what's your direction, let's say?
That's a good question. I've been asking that myself too. I'm not so sure. That's actually, like, before we started the stream, that's something I talked to Merc and Gris about. Is something I would like to ask you is, am I a Christian? Because I don't know. I learned about the psychological significance through Jordan and his biblical series. And that's where I was able to drop the whole atheist approach. And like this, I always had a bad feeling when people started talking about religion. I don't know why, because maybe because I was looking down on them because of that, or something like that. And so that's what Jordan was able to, that's what I was able to dismantle with the help of those lectures. And then I thought I would just like to move closer to the church and find out how that is, because I have an uncle who's Catholic and a devout Catholic. So I thought I might join them just for a bit and see how that is. And then I found out that there's more than 2 churches, because I never heard of the Orthodox Church. I thought there's Protestants and Catholics. We don't really talk about that here in Germany for some reason. And that then I think that's also about when I got into your stuff and tried to understand that better. And then I started working on the Pentecost album, and that's when I really got into that that whole stuff, when I was like feeling the symbolic meaning behind it, when I was engaging all that. Then I started reading the Bible, and like had the same kind of experiences with it, like these small epiphanies. And I also started praying regularly, and that's when I not always, but most of the time, at some point when I'm able to focus enough, like I feel a presence. It feels as if I'm talking to someone and not just like to myself, what people think that praying is, that don't pray. So yeah, that's, I don't quite know where I am. Like, I see the symbolism, I see that it's true, and as far as I've come with reading, I haven't found anything that I don't see. I don't see that it's like meaningful, and maybe not the nicest thing to do in the story, but it still makes sense that that's what is done. Like, even the when people say like, oh, the God of the Old Testament is so mean and evil, or whatever, and angry, and I don't know, people weren't so nice either. So maybe it was necessary to be like the angry father, and then, make people learn discipline. And maybe that was the only way to do it. Otherwise, maybe humanity, there was no way to save us. So that's what he had to do. That's what it seems to me. Is that like, is that a position where I could call myself a Christian? Because I'm also very careful about that.
I mean, I think you're on the road. I think you're on the way for sure. I think that maybe yes. I mean, I think you could say yes. I think though that you probably need to kind of keep moving, because one of the aspects of being a Christian is also being in communion. So it's not really, in the end, this idea of just like, even if you hear in kind of Protestant circles, this idea of like my relationship with God, or kind of my vision of God and my mystical experiences and all that. In Christianity, it's a body. Like we have to also be in the communion of love with others. And so ultimately, I think that you do end up having to kind of find a community in which to integrate and to have to deal with all the problems and the opportunities of that community. Having someone that you have to kind of submit to in a way, because it'll point to you the limits of your own path. It'll show you a lot of things when you have to actually submit to like a spiritual authority, and then also being in community with people who were annoying and jerks, and also great people, and seeing that you kind of have to find a way to love them nonetheless, and to be in communion with them. So I would say that I would say yes in your case, but that hopefully you keep moving and at some point find a communion that you can join.
Yeah, I hope so too. I've been looking for one. I found a Russian Orthodox church in my area, but I wasn't able to contact the priest yet. Like, he doesn't answer my emails.
Yeah, because you're not Russian. It's gonna be tough, man. If you're looking to kind of move towards Orthodoxy, it's tough. It's not easy to become Orthodox. It's not like joining it's not like becoming evangelical. That's easy, but becoming Orthodox can be pretty hard. So I would say arm yourself and get ready for some challenges if that's what you want to do, especially where you are. But yeah, so I mean, I'd be happy to kind of to follow you along. And if you need a priest to give you some advice, I have people that can also kind of help direct you, because you're a little far for us where you are, but nonetheless, some people can give you advice.
Yeah, that I would really appreciate that. Maybe we can
I'll definitely set that up for you. Someone who can kind of help, because if you meet a jerk priest, like it might happen. Like, it could totally happen. You meet this Russian priest and he's a total jerk, and like it doesn't even like, is like, why are you here? Like, go home. Why are you coming to a Russian church? Are you some kind of a spy or something? Like, they could totally happen. Like, there are horrible people in the Orthodox Church, but it would be good to have a good priest around there, even by email. We'll do it. Definitely.
Thank you. Okay, so maybe let's listen to the last song, and then we can talk about it and keep on talking a little bit.
All right,
and
great.
I don't know. Yeah, awesome. Chris, could you start it?
I want to tell you the story of St. Christopher. You've all heard it, but I want to tell it maybe in a different way. The version of the story which we know best actually comes from the Western tradition. In the Western tradition, St. Christopher is not a dog-headed man, but a giant. He's not a canine-ite, but a Canaanite. In an important way, he's a canine-ite. That is a descendant of Cain, associated with the Nephilim, the giants of the Genesis flood. So although he's not a dog-headed man in the Western tradition, and some people have felt safe and represented this version of the icon in their churches because they didn't like the dog-headed version, and that's understandable. But even though he's a Canaanite, St. Christopher is still like the Canaanite woman, that dog on the edge of the table who asks Christ for the crumbs. So as hard as you try, you will not get the dog out of St. Christopher. So as hard as you try, you will not get the dog out of St. Christopher. The story of St. Christopher has him as a vicious warrior in Canaan who is looking to serve the most powerful man in the world. He founds the most renowned and powerful king until he sees that this king is afraid of the devil. This king is afraid of the devil. So he goes to serve the devil. And in this we can see St. Christopher going all the way to the end. All the way to the edge of what is imaginable, and becoming a servant of the evil one directly. Then St. Christopher notices that the evil one is afraid of the cross. So he decides he will serve Christ. Now in the story, at least in the version that's in the Golden Legend, St. Christopher is also a trickster. Because he tells those he served, for example, he informs the king that unless the king tells him who the devil is, that he will no longer serve that king. But in answering St. Christopher, this becomes the very reason why St. Christopher stops serving the king and then looks for the next most powerful person, which is the devil. And then he does the same to the devil. He tricks the devil himself in revealing Christ to him. We need to pay attention to this detail because I think it's an image of what St. Christopher can be for us. The key to the double inversion, which transforms the fall and death into resurrection. It's trampling of death by death. Trampling of death by death. It's an image of what St. Christopher can be for us. The key to the double inversion, which transforms the fall and death into resurrection. Trampling of death by death. As you try, you will not get the dog out of St. Christopher. So as hard as you try, you will not get the dog out of St. Christopher. It's an image of what St. Christopher can be for us. The key to the double inversion, which transforms the fall and death into resurrection. Trampling of death by death.
By the way, that's part 1. There's a part 2. That'll be on the album, of course.
When do you expect to have the whole album done?
That's a good question. So I had a plan originally. Like we have 3 projects that we're working on right now, and I wanted to release like it's an EP where Jordan talks about Nietzsche's proclamation that God is dead. And he reads like from the parable that he made and all that, and he talks about what that meant for people at the time. And then I wanted to release the Jordan album because he talks a lot about like what it means to claim to believe. that's a serious claim, and people use it as like an accessory or something that makes them look better. And then I wanted to release the Pentecost album because I felt like that was enough preparation for people who followed my stuff so that they could get into it, because that's also how I got into it, really. But at the moment, I'm unable to contact Jordan, understandably. And so I think I'm just gonna like, there's one song for the Jordan album that I want to finish, and then the album is done, so I can put it aside, and then I want to just finish the Pentecost one and put it up regardless of if I'm able to contact Jordan.
Yeah. Do you still need to contact him to get like the clearing and everything?
Not really. Like, he sent me an email a year ago where he gave me permission, but my distributor wants either like a message from him on Twitter or a copy of his driver's license. And
well, that's not happening.
Yeah, I suppose. So yeah, I gotta wait for that to be able to upload the whole album. Like, it's funny because I can upload songs with him sometimes, and sometimes not. It's like sometimes they detect Jordan and sometimes they don't. Yeah, but that's the thing. So I think something between 2 and 4 weeks, depending on what's happening in the next in the next time. If there's anything that I have to attend to, like university stuff or anything, but I should be done with that too. Like, I finished my midterm stuff today, and all that. So I think something between 2 and 4 weeks.
Well, looking forward to it. Yeah, sorry. I think for a while it's going to be very difficult to have any contact with him. You know, I haven't heard from him since months. I haven't heard from him for months. And so yeah, I wrote him a few messages when I learned that he was back home. I wrote him a little message, but I didn't get an answer. So I think he still has quite a ways to go.
Yeah, and he should take his time. Like, there's no rush with that. I'm just glad that he got better, that he got out of that whole mess. And yeah, definitely.
Well, I'm definitely looking forward to having the whole Pentecost album. I think that'll be fun. And yeah, I mean, it'd be interesting to hear the whole thing kind of together, because listening just to the song, because there's a few that have been out on that subject. And so listening to the ones tonight, there's quite a bit of variety in the musical styles that you chose, and quite a bit of variety in the beats and everything. So it'll be interesting to hear it from kind of start to finish, to be able to get a sense of the ideas that I present, but then see how that fits with all the different music and beats that you put in there. So
yeah, like, I've heard the album. I think that it works quite well. I'm looking forward to hearing what you think when we're done with it. Like, the last one that we listened to, the whole Saint Christopher story, that's also a story that really touched me. Like, I didn't know about it before, and then, like you said, there's two stories of Saint Christopher. One where he's the dog-headed man, and one where he's the giant. And it was crazy for me to see how someone who doesn't pray and doesn't fast still can serve Christ directly. Like, he carried him across the river, and that also gave me hope for myself. That's when I heard it. I also have a question about that, because I think you told the story of Saint Christopher in one of your videos too, and you mentioned how there's, I think, at one point later in his development, there's 2 prostitutes or something who tried to seduce him because of some reason. I don't quite remember.
That's how he dies. And so that's in the major legend. Let's say the earlier legends of Saint Christopher is that the king, or this weird king, I forget his name, he has a weird name, like a foreign king, tries to get him to renounce his Christianity, and then has these women try to seduce him, and so then they end up converting.
That's like, was Saint Christopher a real saint at the end of his life? Like, did he fast, did he pray and all that, or was he still the monster who
there are so many versions of this story that it's really hard to know, because the earlier versions of the story don't have the water crossing part. They just talk about him being a Phrygian, and then suggesting that he's like a extreme foreigner, and so a kind of monster, a dog-headed man. And so those are the versions, and so in those stories you don't necessarily get the sense that he crossed the waters. Then in the versions where he crosses the waters, sometimes he crosses the waters, and when he gets to the other side, then he's healed of his ugliness. And there are other versions where it's the opposite, where he is good looking, younger, and he asks God to make him ugly so that he's not tempted to use his ugliness. And so there are all kinds of versions of the story of St. Christopher. He's like, these early saints have very slippery legends about them. And so it's hard to, well, it's actually not hard. It's good in the sense that you have all these different stories. And so if you look at the different stories, you get a sense of what it is that this saint is manifesting. Like, what is it that he's manifesting in the world? But for sure, it's interesting. The St. Christopher story is fascinating because, I have received some flack from clergy. Like, there are some clergy that are not happy that I talk about the St. Christopher story, or that I emphasize it, or that I represent icons of him with a head of a dog. And it's very fascinating because the reason they don't like it is a very understandable reason. They don't like the fact that you would dehumanize the foreign, right? And so they see it almost like as a right-wing sin, where it's like, we don't want to encourage this idea of dehumanizing the foreign. But interestingly enough, the people that thank me for using the St. Christopher story are all people that are freaks themselves. Like, it's all people that have that in them. And when they hear the story, when they see the icon, they don't identify this like foreign person as that. They see themselves as that. They see in their own life, in their own story, in their own status as a weird, marginalized kind of person that doesn't fit in categories. They're like, no, man, that's me. Like, that's me. And it's funny because that's me too. Like, I also have that association, which is why I was always attracted to that story. And so it's funny to have priests who, I understand them. I sympathize with the priests that are angry that I'm using this image, but in the end, it ends up being the opposite of what they think. It's not, all the people that have been touched by the story are touched by it because they identify as St. Christopher, not because they see St. Christopher as this evil thing out there that they need to fight. So that's been an interesting thing. And so I persist in using the image. If ever my bishop says you can't, like, you have to stop, then I will. But until then, I persist in using the image because I think it has so much to say to us today. The image of St. Christopher is really the image. Like, St. Christopher is the saint of our age. He's the saint of the end of the world. And so I think we need him more than ever right now.
Yes. Yeah, I totally agree. Like, from an emotional point of view, I think St. Christopher is what made it possible for me to move towards the church, not because I was, let's say, looking down on the church, but because I felt that the church would look down on me. And so that's okay, because there are probably things about me that people should look down on if in the church. But St. Christopher was like this entry ticket to, okay, you can come here, and then you can start to assimilate, let's say, or to grow, or whatever you want to call it.
Yeah, and I think that's it. It's like when you recognize the freaky aspect of yourself, or the weird, or the kind of dark and the incomplete aspect of yourself. On the one hand, you're like, this is, like you said, this is what will prevent me from entering into communion. But you really recognize that. So you don't also want the church to tell you you're okay as a dog-headed man. Come on in, let's bring you up to the altar. You're like, no, I don't know. I don't want to go up to the altar. Like, I just want to put my foot in, and then hopefully I can move forward and move in and be transformed. So it's like, that's what I think that's the power of stories like that, which is that it's to say, it's like to say, here's how you're part of us. Here's how we can encounter you, but also also acknowledging the difficulty, also acknowledging the lack and the, let's say, the incompleteness of the situation. So I think that's, and people, it's like, I think that honest people who are really trying to deal with their own passions and their own sins and their own difficulty, they prefer that to someone saying, no, it's fine, you're okay as you are, you know, God loves you, you're fine, come on in and don't change and be, and you're like, what do you mean? So then why would I join your thing? Like, why would I join your thing if you're telling me that I'm fine the way I am and I don't need to change, because then I'll just continue my disordered lifestyle and I won't join your thing, because it's a lot harder to be in your thing than it is to just stay home and, you know, whatever, and drink and do whatever it is that I was doing before.
Yeah, completely. It's also so frustrating if you notice that there's something wrong with you and you're, let's say you're unhappy because of that. And then, you know, the people who should be able to guide you towards a better life, they just tell you, you know, it's all fine and good. You don't have to change at all. Like, but I feel that something has to change. It's frustrating. So I'm very just so grateful for that being a part of the tradition, and also for you emphasizing that so much, that like, yeah, it had such an immense impact on my life that I can't put it into words. It's absolutely crazy.
Well, thanks. I appreciate it, because for me, it was like a hunch, because it was a hunch in the sense that I knew that that's what it did for me. And so I was like, okay, I'm gonna go out on a limb and talk about these weird things and talk about gargoyles and all these strange things, because I know, like, I come from a weird skater background, punk rock background. And so it's like, I understand why this would actually appeal to people, because I come from that weird place. And so I appreciate you confirming that for me, because sometimes, you know, obviously there are moments where you're doubting, you're like, okay, am I leading people out? Like, am I making monsters? Is that what I'm doing? Like, am I creating them by talking about this stuff? Who knows, you know?
I wouldn't, I think I see why you would think that you might also create monsters with that. That's something that I also noticed about myself when I first started honestly approaching, let's say, my sins, that they became worse for a certain amount of time, but in a strangely conscious way. Like, it felt I had to make it clear to myself what's wrong, really, and understand that, and then I could move away from it. Otherwise I would be pulled towards it again. And that's something that I don't really feel anymore. Like, not that I'm sin free, not at all, but yeah, you get my point.
Yeah, it makes sense. And it's like you recognize that part of yourself and you kind of saw it clearly. Yeah, that makes total sense. Makes total sense.
And that's also when one can start to integrate it to a degree. Like, for example, like, sexual passion is not something bad in itself. It's just when it's at the wrong place, let's say, then it's problematic. And I think that's the same with most of the others too. Like, there's a place for anger, there's a place for hunger, let's say, all of that.
Yeah, of course. And I think that's really, it's completely traditional to talk about how our passions are a reflection of realities in the world, and that they can, if, like you said, if they're in the right place and they're directed in the right direction, then they do what they need to do, and then they serve the role that they need to serve. The problem is always when we're a slave of our passions. You know, someone who is, let's say, in Christ, then the passions end up serving the ultimate purpose, right? They end up being in service of a higher thing, rather than you kind of becoming a slave to your own passion. So yes. Yeah, you're totally right about that. So I have a question, I guess, because I'm watching you making these songs. Like, I'm watching you kind of make these music, and I'm wondering, like, what is, like, I don't know much about you. Like, do you make music for a living, or are you studying? Like, what's your, like, this is more a personal question, and I'm just curious to know, like, what it is that you're doing.
Yeah, I'm studying philosophy and political science, but I'm not really studying that at the moment, to be honest. I would like to switch that one, because yeah, I would like to switch that one.
Studying philosophy and political science in Germany.
Yes.
Yeah. It doesn't sound like a lot of fun.
No, it's not. I mean, the philosophy stuff works because for some reason I don't have postmodern professors.
Oh, really?
Yeah, like they seem quite, I want to say not conservative, but like traditional. They're not postmodernists. Like I noticed that when I was arguing with postmodernists in my seminar, that they were backing up what I was saying and not holding against that. So
well, that's good. Oh, then you're in the right place if you can at least have that. That's awesome.
yeah. And I would like to make music for a living. Like that's my plan. I hope that that's possible at some point. I think that it should be possible for multiple reasons. Like on the one hand, we have the internet. That's the biggest marketplace ever. I think that every niche can find its market, let's say, on there. And also people, like I'm exploiting people in a way, because people have this this, as you said, this hunger for meaning. And I feel that too. And I think that that's going to be more important in the future, because people are going to become very, very frustrated like they are right now. And that's going to become worse, I think. And at some point they are going to recognize what's frustrating them so badly. And I think it's possible that the culture will then, if everything goes well, will then move towards like stuff like that, and the entertainment industry stops to be mere entertainment and starts to become something fulfilling while being fun.
Yeah, I think it makes sense. I think that it's definitely possible. I think at this moment, in a way, it's the most possible that it's ever been that you could do that. I just hope that we'll continue to be able to be online in the future, because it really feels like that might not be, so we'll see. Like I don't want to be a pessimist and a weird conspiracy theorist, but hopefully we'll still be able to do this for several years, for a while. But it's weird. Like there are weird things going on. It's hard not to notice all the strange things that are happening. I saw like a major drop off, and it was really interesting. So let's say around January, my videos were getting a lot of views, and I could see that I had kind of fallen into the right part of YouTube's algorithm. Things were really surprising. And then I did a video, what it was called From Equality to Inversion, I think. And then I kind of tapped into this problem of how when you push for equality, you end up having to push for inversion because equality doesn't actually exist. Like the idea of pure equality, of like absolute equality, doesn't exist. Anyways, so I pushed that, and then I saw like the video took off. Like in one day, it had like 20,000, 30,000 views in one day. And then after like 3 days, it stopped, and it became like a line like that. And I was like, okay, what's going on? And then that was it. From then on, it's like YouTube didn't like me anymore. And I think that's happening to so many people. Like, I think it's happening to so many people, especially this year with like the election and everything coming in the US. So it's hard to know how far that's going to go and what that means and what's going to happen. But hopefully, and it's weird because we're kind of hoping that ThinkSpot was going to be the place where this wouldn't happen and it would kind of be an alternative, but I'm not sure. We'll see. It's still possible, but at least for now, it feels like they haven't fulfilled what they're going to be, but we'll see. I'm trying a few things with them. I'm doing a talk with Sargon of Akkad on ThinkSpot. And so we'll see. I'm going to experiment a few things with them and see if they can maybe be the next platform where we're not afraid to lose our voice, let's say.
Yeah, that would be very cool. I was also happy and impressed when Jordan announced the whole ThinkSpot thing. I was very excited for that. And I think the reason that I wasn't able to really get into it is because I'm not reading as much as I should yet. Like I'm still moving towards that. I'm still wasting too much time. So yeah. So I think that's more up to me than up to them in my personal case. But also, I don't know how many people are really involved in the let's call it a movement. What this whole thing with you, Jordan, and the IDW and all that is. I don't know how many people are into that yet, and how many people are gonna get into that in the future.
I have no idea. It's hard to know, and it's also changed since Jordan has been out of the picture. and so it's hard to know what's in the future. So I mean, we need him more than now than ever, because everything he said in 2016, 4 years ago, last election, last U.S. election, everything he said is happening at a grand scale. It's like microcosm, macrocosm. Everything that happened to him and happened at the university is now happening to the entire world. And so it's like, man, we need you, Jordan. We need you to say things, because this is it. Like, it's going down right now, man. This is what it feels like. But yeah, I also understand that he's not there. He's not available. But in a way, it really feels like we need him more than ever right now to kind of act as a lightning rod, but also as a motor for people who are wanting to resist these insane changes that we're seeing happen to us.
Yeah, I totally agree. I also hope that he's going to come back soon, and that we managed to take on this. Like this, it's crazy how real this is getting. Like yeah.
You guys have been following the Great Reset stuff? Like, man, it's real. It's all very, very real. Anyways, you can look that up if you haven't followed it. You haven't followed the Great Reset? Yeah, man. So the World Economic Forum announced a Great Reset. This has happened a while ago. They've been talking about it for a long time. I think they've been talking about it since before COVID, but they're saying that COVID is now a reason for and this is the World Economic Forum, for all the leaders, all the world leaders and all the world economic leaders to create a Great Reset based on intersectional things. And this is all the top, like Prince Charles has been talking about the Great Reset. And it was on the cover of Time magazine this month, the Great Reset by Klaus Schwab. It's a scary stuff. So now it's like a world movement to rethink of the entire society, in the world society, in terms of intersectional values. So it's happening, guys. It's happening right now.
See, I've lived like a hermit for so long. Like, I went into complete isolation after like a decade ago, and lived for a while, no internet, no phone. The only amount of the world I take in is kind of through the channel and bits of things I hear about on podcasts. I really stepped out of the world 10 years ago. Like, I get my supplies dropped off and stuff. So it's the supposed reality people are reporting to me on the internet is becoming more and more like science fiction.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's for sure. And the thing is, this is the thing. The thing is that it's like, this is the strangest. It's so weird to be right now, because so if you say there's a group of elite people who want to reset the entire world and all of society and all of the economic system based on intersectional ideas, they'll say you're a conspiracy theorist. But it's on the cover of Time magazine. It's like, they're telling us that they want to do this. I'm not making it up. I'm not pulling it out of QAnon. Like, they're telling us that they want to do this. Man, sorry.
Yeah, it's
and here I am talking about this on your channel, so I can get your channel in trouble instead of my channel. Sorry about that.
Yeah, feel free. We don't get any views anyway. There's nothing fresh here.
I think that's what we have to do, though. Like, I also want to think that, because it's meaningful, but I still think that that's what we have to do. Like, this is the last moment where we could at least try to correct things and to stop things from going downhill completely. And so I think we have to do everything that we can, and we have to put everything into this, because, like, it might not look like 1917 in Russia completely, but it'll probably take on some form like that. It always did. And they are doing this right now. If you look at Black Lives Matter and Antifa, what they're doing to America at the moment with burning down cities. And like when they started doing this, I saw the videos of how they jumped onto one person with 20 people and how destroyed they were after that. And that's just, it's not a game anymore. This is not fun anymore. It's not theory or anything. This is fucking real.
Yeah.
And so, yeah.
But the thing is that the thing, this is why, like, in a way, like when I say I wish Jordan would come back, is that the thing that Jordan was giving and the thing that I tried also to give is to not just take the opposite stance, is to say, look, I want to show you the meaning of the margin. Like, I don't want to just cut it off. I want you to understand what these things mean, what their place is, what their function is in society, because that's the balanced view. That's actually the traditional view, right? It's not, but yeah, it's harder to get attention because people want to fight. Like, people just want to fight. They want you to pick a side. And I've had people write me in private saying, okay, now you have to pick a side. Like, you have to pick a side because this is it. Like, this is it's going down. And I'm like, well, I know what I don't like, but I'm not going to pick a side the way you want me to, because I don't like your side either.
Yeah, I see what you mean.
And I stay completely out of all of that. Like the political stuff of Jordan's, I avoided for the longest time.
Yeah.
Because for me, it's the self-help side of it. And for me, I just consider all that mainstream stuff is not my business. I'm on the fringes, and I'm just focused on trying to keep keep
your life together
and keeping myself out of the mental institution. Beyond that, if I can help some individuals on any side of the culture war, also, just it seems to me everybody's wrong. It's not left or right. It's not any one particular religion for me. We're all limited. I believe in a God that is not God number one, not God number two, but God number pi. It's something infinite. It's well beyond the concepts of one and two. And so I kind of figure this is fucked. We don't know what we are, where we are. I struggle with my own faith, but just to put, like Peterson says, when you struggle enough, you have to face that basic good and evil question and have some theory of it. I have chosen to put my faith in the God is good and to search for that and take that side. And with my depression and whatnot, I don't always feel it. Like, my inner demons try to take over, and that's a struggle I deal with. So I wish the world the best and hope you guys take society into a golden age. But whatever kind of apocalypse this is, I'm just here to help whatever people on the margin need some assistance just pulling themselves together or dealing with whatever happens.
Which is also what I think that's the level on which we have to do this. You talked about how it can.
I think we have to do it on every level. We need the top to work on making the system honest and good. We need the middle to work, and we need the bottoms and the gutters to try to make that small step. Do what you can. We really need all the levels to start harmonizing and working together. I don't see how it can be just top down or just bottom up. Like, just the grassroots won't work, and just reforming the top won't. It doesn't seem to me.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. It has to be everything. What I was getting at was, Jonathan, you talked about, I saw a video where you talked about your differences with Jordan, and there's this, you said something like he's focusing, let's say, too much on the individual, on individualism in a way. And the way I understood the focus on individualism was that if it's this clean your room idea. You can't put the world together if your room isn't clean. And I thought that what it means to be a good individual, let's say, is also what it means to be a good part of the community. So you can't be a good individual. I can't be a good individual and a bad brother, for example, or a bad son or father or whatever. So I always felt like that's inseparably.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, I agree in the sense that that's one of the reasons why, like, I was never really super vocal about, let's say, my small disagreement with him, in the sense that I think that it seems it's very traditionally Christian to say that the world is on the shoulders of the saint, of the just person who prays. And so the idea is, become a saint. You become a saint. That's your responsibility. Like, you love your neighbor. Don't look at how everybody else is not doing what they need to do. Like, you become that, you do that, and then the world will be transformed by that. I think my criticism comes more in that, even when that happens, what's inevitable is that it's going to scale up, and it's going to scale up into communities, and it's also going to scale up in terms of identities. And I think that the thing is that the identities will scale up. And so you'll end up having communal identities, and you'll end up having bigger identities, and you have to deal with that. And you have to deal with it in a way that acknowledges the problem, but also shows the opportunity. And I feel like one of the things that I see Jordan doing is that he would really focus on the individual, because he wasn't sure what to do with the bigger problem of identity, of, like, in terms of, let's say, national identity or group identity. Sorry?
Like, he was just like, to think that he spent most of his time helping individuals. It's not like he was originally a political commentator.
Yeah.
And thinking at that societal level, like, to frame him as a psychologist, I think it makes a lot of sense. If
you read, like, if you listen to the first talk I ever gave with him, which was something about logos, it was like the resurrection of logos, I think I called it. Yeah. In that talk, I bring it up right away. I say, look, the resurrection of logos means the return of identity. We can't avoid it, because that's part of what logos does. Is it focuses identities. And so if we're going to see that, then we also need to understand what that does, and we need to deal with it. Like, we need to deal with it in the positive and the negative, so that we can mitigate the negative part. But we can't avoid it. Like, we can't. It's gonna scale, and it's gonna revive. So as we see logos coming back, or kind of reviving, then one of the side effects of that is we're gonna see extremes of identity. It's gonna happen. And so the question is, how can we encourage the positive aspects of identity, and also be the types of people that try to mitigate, let's say, the extremes of identity, the negative aspects of identity. So that I think that, at least, like, if you could maybe, how can I say this? If you could sum up, like, one of the aspects of what I'm doing, I feel like that's what I'm always doing. And so I'll give a talk where I talk about how the importance of identity and community and all this, and then I'll give another talk where I talk about the importance of the question and the feminine, and, you know, the frame, and all of these other aspects, which are also part of the, let's say, meta symbolism of everything. So that's one of the things I'm trying to do. But I think that if I sat Jordan down and if I asked him about it, he would probably, like, agree with me. He'd probably say, yeah, you're right, that this is real, like, this is true. But it has side effects. Like, it definitely does. So
I see.
So speaking of what's going on in the world, I know your Halloween was fairly normal, Jonathan, but for anyone watching this where, because of social distancing, their Halloween was disrupted, rather than being at a party or having trick-or-treaters come, it's been disrupted. I know you've got videos out about the symbolism of Halloween that people can check out on your channel. What would be specifically the symbolism of having the Halloween festival disrupted?
Well, I mean, it's interesting, because let's say the feast of Halloween is disrupted through the desire for safety, which is, like, Halloween is all about coming into contact with things that aren't safe. And so it's a very odd situation. That's what it is. Like, Halloween is you having very dangerous things come to your house, things that are masked, things that you can't recognize. And then you have to have a kind of a reaction of hospitality and give them enough of something so that they go away, and that they don't ransack your house, or that they don't, like, cause trouble. And so because of it, the fact that we want to have, like, the safest Halloween ever is just, I mean, obviously it kind of, it's obviously a, let's say, performative contradiction, you know, where it's like, you can't have a safe Halloween because Halloween is by definition not safe. Like, it's not really safe.
Isn't
like,
the perfect inversion of paying the ghost to go away that we discussed Pentecost tonight? That rather than having the evil ghost come to your door that you pay to go away, you invite the Holy Ghost in and invite it to stay.
There you go. That's great. Yeah. And then we can move out and we can encounter the monsters with the Spirit of God. Makes sense. Yeah, makes sense.
Is that what you in the Trick or Treat song that we made last year? You said like the answer to the problem of Halloween is prayer. What exactly do you mean by that?
If you look at the cycle of Halloween, so the actual cycle of Halloween is that there are 3 days. There's the Eve of All Hallows, and so that's today, which is the Eve of All Saints, basically. That's what All Hallows mean. And so tomorrow is All Saints, which is the day where we commemorate all the saints, known and unknown, basically, right? And then the day after, it's All Souls Day, which was added later on the Catholic calendar. But All Souls is when we pray for all the dead departed. And so that's when in a lot of countries they'll have these like massive events where they have like, you know, thousands of candles in the cemeteries. They'll have mass procession through cemeteries where everybody goes and visits the graves of their departed. And so you can kind of see it as this progression, you know, celebrating the saints and then praying for all the souls and praying to the saints for all the souls. And so you can see how it's connected. And my contention was that there was something of this kind of celebration of death, which was missing, let's say, in the sacred aspect, which manifested itself, you know, no matter what. Like, it's just going to manifest itself. You can't help it. And it was the more carnival aspect of death and the more upside down aspect of death and the more problematic aspect of death. Mm-hmm. And so let's say my basic contention is that Halloween would make a lot of sense if it was celebrated with all the three, where it's like the first day you have this weird kind of placating demons ritual where you're almost kind of recognizing the problem and recognizing the difficulty of dealing with your passions, dealing with the strange, dealing with the unknown. And so all of this is kind of happening. And then after that, then you have 2 days where you celebrate the positive aspects of the dead, which is this idea of them becoming like principalities. And then also that we can also pray for them and kind of pray for all that is fallen so that it can participate in salvation. So that's what I mean, is that ultimately, even for your own passions, right, the solution is prayer and intercession, but sometimes we can't do it. I mean, it's like we're all human, and it's good to know that, let's say, the little things we do, they do help. Like, it's not, I'm not a purist, right? And so I can understand, like, you meet someone, like, let's say you go to church, right? You go to church and then you walk outside of church and you see someone who was in church and who's smoking. And so, like, the one thing you could think is, you know, like, oh, this person, you know, they're smoking, this is like their passion or whatever. And the second thing you can think is, you know, maybe they're doing this because if they weren't, they'd be doing something a lot more, right? Mm-hmm. I guess, right? You know, and that's the reality, and it's a reality that you should be very careful not to be a hypocrite about, because everybody does that. Everybody does that, you know. And so there are little things, like little rituals that you can realize, like little valve rituals that everybody participates in, little things that, you know, like I said, like the idea of eating dessert, for example, like, so you eat dessert, you eat a little bit of sweet, let's say every day or every week, depending on how you plan it. And that can be a way to prevent you actually from going all out into like a passion of eating, because it's a little valve of like kind of having a little bit so that you don't lose control. And so I think that's not the best solution. Like, I'm not saying this is the way to go. It's not the best solution. The best solution is, of course, to pray and to submit yourself to God and to let God fully transform you in your suffering as you're dealing with these passions that you have. But I mean, we're not saints. At least I'm not a saint. And so I know that I have these other patterns, and it's good to know them and it's good to recognize them. And Halloween, that's what's in trick-or-treating, that's what you see happening. It's a ritualization of that process where the passions come, the monsters come. You don't let them into the house. You keep them on the porch and you give them a little something, a little sweet, so that they're satisfied enough to go away for a while, you know?
Yeah, I now that you said it, it also totally makes sense, but I'm gonna ask anyway. So you say that the suffering is necessary for the transformation. Like I see it now that you said it, I see it in Christ too, like the torture stuff and all that before the crucifixion. But like is that the point of suffering? Is that for transformation?
It's like a training, right? It's like a training ground. There's reasons why, if you want to train a soldier, you'll bring them into a difficult space where they don't have what they usually have, where they're deprived. So suffering can be a training ground, because as you suffer and you accept to suffer and you resist temptation in your suffering, you're training yourself generally. So let's say you have one passion, like let's say you have something you can't stop yourself from doing, and then you accept to suffer, and then you accept to just suffer, right? And so you have the desire pulling you and you just suffer. You know, what you're doing, what's happening is that you're training yourself for other stuff too. Right?
True.
So it's like, if you've never suffered, let's say you've never suffered and you've never endured suffering by not relieving yourself in some way, you know, then like imagine that someone would want to torture you to get information from you. Like you would cave in a second, like you would just fall. And it had nothing to do with your passion, but it has to do with training yourself, you know, to accept suffering and to not give into it immediately. So it's definitely part of the process. Not fun, obviously, but it's definitely part of the process of, not in a masochistic way. Like it's not a masochistic thing. It's mostly the capacity to not give in and to endure, so that you train yourself to endure adversity in the future.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
And that is largely how I deal with my depression. Like at the depths of it, when I'm feeling like I've had some very difficult times this month, at the depths of it, when I reach out like in prayer to God, the answer is that it's of service to be able to go into that state and not turn against God. It's much harder to love God when God feels distant. It's harder to be forgiving of others when you're feeling suicidally depressed. It's hard to accept, yes, I'm willing to be suicidally depressed, because either to try to numb it, like to try to cure suicidal depression, or to kill yourself, is both being not willing to endure it. Like suicide itself is to run away from the suicidal pressure. And so to me, it becomes a labor of, I will endure this because I trust, and that this is my act of worship, is to endure this willingly. And even if I can't be functional, I won't allow the adversary in me to take over and curse God for what I'm going through.
I'd also be rather scared to curse God for what I'm going through. You know, like I don't know if you have that too, but sometimes I have these little instances of rebellion, let's say, when something bad happens. I'm like, oh, why does that have to be? But then I'm like, oh, maybe not complain about it. Maybe there's a reason for that. And yeah, maybe it could be even worse.
Like a roaring force in me, which is why I've had to train mindfulness so much, that like I can get the complete fucking monsters that come up under control, where I don't let them take over action. But when that comes up, it takes 100% of my focus to maintain that mindfulness and to be making aware choices to allow that to be, to accept enduring it, but not to go with it. But I fell with just horrific shit. And it's a matter of being mindful, not attaching to it for me. But it's brutally difficult to deal with.
Yeah.
And I do find you were saying earlier that in some atheists, you sense a sort of like an angriness or an upsetness at God. In myself, observing very much when I enter my difficult states is like, you could use the term subpersonalities, but I realize I'm not one thing. Like, I've got different parts of me. I've got an atheist part of myself very much that looks at everything from that direction, like that will say to me that the faith is foolish and blah, blah, blah. But that comes up when I'm extremely depressed, when the other when the parts of me that want to hate God, it's when those energies fill me, that atheist part of my mind just activates so much. And I'm wondering, Jonathan, and I get that, okay, I don't know how much you want to go into this, because this is like kind of personal, but you clearly know a lot about God and have like this deep understanding of symbolism that affects your life. Is it just at an intellectual level, or when you pray, do you have phenomenological experience of God that reinforces your beliefs, or are you operating just out of an intellectual framework?
I mean, like if I have visions and stuff?
Or
I don't have visions.
And
I don't want them.
Like, in praying, do you ever get senses of comfort from God?
Of course, yeah, of course. I mean, I think that happens to everybody. I think just like everybody, there are moments where it's kind of easy to pray, and you get a sense of centering and peace, and you get a sense that everything is aligned.
I don't think everyone gets that when they pray. That's why I was
but I think that everybody probably gets it sometimes. Like, I maybe not, but for sure, like I have cycles, and then there are other times when I feel like God is far, far, far away, and that you're just kind of praying into nothingness. Like, I think that everybody kind of feels that way too. And then there are other moments where I don't, like, I just feel like I can barely pray. Like I can just holding on to a rope, and it's like, you're just barely holding on. And so I think that there are cycles, and I go through all of them. And so, yeah, so that's
how do you deal with like the difficult times when God feels most distant and when your faith is tested the most?
I mean, my faith is never, it's weird. That never happens. Like, okay. I never, my faith has never been, I've never doubted my faith. Like, that's just, all my life, I kind of have sympathy for people who have dealt with that, but I've never dealt with that. I don't know why. I can't explain it. I've never doubted God, and I've never doubted Christ. It's always been more of like a laziness, like, let's say spiritual laziness, or spiritual, or a sense that I'm not good enough, or also a sense that, let's say, I'm not, that it's far, right? This idea that God is very, very far away, and that I don't, like, whatever I do or whatever I say is not connecting. And so what I do when the best thing, I think, that when you feel like God is very far away, is to look for guidance, to look for someone who can kind of help you along the way. In those moments when I've had a friend or a priest or someone who has kind of spiritually encouraged me, then what you can end up doing is you actually end up using those people almost like as a crutch, you could say, in those moments where you actually, when someone, like, let's say a priest, someone you trust, will say, all right, like, get your act together. You need to say these prayers. I've had people sometimes, like friends that I trust and that I care about, give me, let's say, a prayer rope and say, here, like, I'm giving you this prayer rope. I want you to use this prayer rope. And so it's like you almost ride you end up riding their moment, right? In that moment, they're closer to God, or they have a stronger spiritual practice, and though you can end up riding on that. And I think that's also part of what communion is. That's also part of what the strength of communion is that, when some of us are weaker, then others can help us along, by praying for us, by encouraging us, by telling us what to do, sometimes even by saying, here, do this. And then you're like, okay, I can't get it from my own will, so I'll take it from your will. Right. it's easier to just do when you're in a weak spot, it's easier to do what someone else wants you to do than it is to do it through your own will. And so those moments happen to everybody. I think at least they happen to me sometimes.
There's while we're talking about being in a bad place and also the whole apocalypse stuff that we've been talking about, Mercury once, when we were having a private session, Mercury once mentioned that there's, in the end, nobody gets left behind. That's what he believes, and I would like to know if that's a Christian notion too. Like in the end, that even the devil comes back and like willingly comes back and acknowledges his faults and whatever.
Although my inner atheist wants to point out that I fully recognize that I have a need to believe that. So I've seen deeply like how much confirmation bias works in all of us and how much what we believe isn't really under our own choice. And so it's not, yeah, and again, believe is such a weird word, but part of me is fully aware that when I think deeply on everything, I don't want a heaven that is built on anyone being left damned eternally for this. And I have come through in my own mystical, weird journey that is like both fully accepting Christ, but also wandering in various areas. My deep belief is that in the end, this whole game is good. And in the end, there's a complete reunification. And I don't think that's necessarily Christian, but I just wanted to point out that I am fully aware of the psychological need I have to view God that way.
Yeah.
But yeah, so what do you think of that? How much is that heresy?
It is heresy. I can tell you this is the best way I can present it to you, is that on the one hand, there are ecumenical councils that have denounced what's known as apokatastasis. That is the idea of the final restoration where the devil and his demons will be restored. And so those have been denounced, and that you're not supposed to teach that. Okay. On the other hand, there are also deep strains in the church fathers that also point to this notion of a final restoration. So in St. Gregory of Nyssa, exactly, you find not only in his pronouncements, but in the very structure of the way he writes. For example, the life of Moses, you'll find that he is hinting at the idea that this pattern has to end with God. Like it has to. There's no way, you can't avoid how the pattern ends with God. And so my tendency is to hold those two things in attention that I don't try to resolve, which is there's a reason why we talk about the fire of Gehenna, and that reason is important. And there's also a reason why we talk about how, like you said, the infinite has to win, right? God has to win in the end. And so people will find different solutions to that, different ways of presenting it, different ways of dealing with that mystery. I tend to just want to hold it in attention and say, you can hear like Orthodox priests, they'll say things like, you'll hear them, they'll say things like, we can hope that all will be saved. I don't know if you ever heard that. Like you'll hear many Orthodox clergy say, we live in the hope that all will be saved. And that's as much as they can say. And so I would say that to me, that's also kind of how I see it.
I think it also makes sense to present it that way, because for some people, it could become confusing if they start to sympathize with the devil. You know, that's how I feel. If I think about this, like the devil starts to, like, I feel sorry for him, let's say, in a way. And I think it's like, maybe that's appropriate to a degree, but maybe it's also very, very dangerous, because the devil probably is not going to come and say, oh, you're so nice because you're feeling sorry for me. he'll probably use that against you. So maybe that's really not something that we should teach, but still.
And I would say, like, this is the thing that I'm seeing, and this is one of the reasons why I dislike the apokatastasis, let's say the final restoration position, is that I notice that a lot of people, not everybody, but a lot of people hold that position because they want to not be judged by the world. Not just because they want it. There's not just because they had some kind of mystical intuition. And so maybe Mercury, that's what you had, but a lot of people, it's just because they know that to not say that will make them not be, is a politically unacceptable, right? It's socially unacceptable. It's right now, it's unacceptable to say anything but that. And so that's one of the dangers I have. But
and in my weird mystical visionary like sense of things, it doesn't take away that hell could be real and eternal, that an eternity is not an endless amount of time, that eternity is something outside of space and time, where I don't know how to put this, where it's like paralogical. To me, it's as if both are true, which does mean that ultimately it ends in a reunion, but you would not, and it's like at different levels. At the bottom level, that is not an excuse to say, oh, everything gets redeemed in the end. I can sin as long as I want, because the deeper you go into hell, like just the worse that is down on this level. And at this level, susceptible to the devil, you completely oppose the evil. Yet from a higher perspective, all of this has to occur. And for me, it leads me to the loving my enemy and taking that all the way to the adversary. But not the same way as like the love of a small child doesn't mean you let it do what it wants. I oppose evil action in the world and yet love evil and am praying for its redemption as well. Ideally, what we want to do is help the evil eventually realize that the hellfire is the same as the Holy Spirit, and help them burn away their evil and come back. So in a way, it's evil is still fully something to oppose, like the pattern of evil, yet to love everything that has gotten stuck in that pattern. And that, I don't know how to explain that better.
No, but I see what you mean.
My brain is seizing up.
But I think your intuition, I think I understand your intuition, and I think that it's right. And so, yeah. And I think, like I said, I think
it's wrong. I assume everything I say is wrong. I'm always struggling to find better.
Your intuition is right. I think your intuition is right. And I think, like I said, in a way, it's also a mystery that it's not helpful for us to solve, like, because for us, what we need to do, and we know what we need to do, and we need to live, to live and come closer to God and love our neighbors. And that's what we need to do. And so it's like the mystery of how all will be restored, or if and how and what that means, I think it's something we probably shouldn't be talking about in the end. Guys, it's like midnight. I need to go.
No problem. Thank you for being here very much.
Yeah. And thanks for doing everything you do. I feel humbled by what you're doing, and I feel excited to see where we can go. And also I'm hoping that I can have more time to be more involved. And I did that one time. I sang a little bit for one of the songs. Yeah. So I'm hoping I was supposed to do it this time, and then I just ran out of time. So, but hopefully that'll happen in the near future.
Yeah, I hope so too. I'm very looking forward to that. And yeah, it's also for me, it's very, very exciting also that you're so actively involved in the whole thing. So that's, it's also humbling for me, I gotta say.
And Mercury, thanks for hosting this, and thanks for being our guard dog.
Hey, thanks for coming. It's always even depressed, it's a pleasure to talk to you. So happy Halloween, God bless, and Yeah, let's talk again sometime.
All
also,
right, guys.
thanks to Gris for hosting
Yeah.
this and managing the songs and all that.
Yeah, and
Yeah,
everybody
thank you for everything
who
behind
showed up late on Halloween and who abandoned their kids, you know, on the day that we usually hang out with them. Thanks for everybody showing up, guys.
Yes. Yeah.
All right, bye everybody.
Yeah. Goodbye.